Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name's Andy Martin, and this Studies of Religion Masterclass is about religious expression in Australia. Begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from Gadigal land. I acknowledge the Gadigal's ongoing ownership of this land. I acknowledge that this land was taken from them without proper consultation and that restitution has never been made and sovereignty has never been ceded. I pledge to work with all Australians for lasting reconciliation. Today we're looking, as I said, about religion in Australia since 1945. So we're going to be talking about the current religious landscape and how that's changed over time. If you can do these things, you will have been successful. So if you can use census data to outline the percentage of Australians in the different major religious traditions and also the percentage who indicate no religion. If you can use census data to describe how that has all changed over time from between 1945 and the present. And if you can explain factors which have caused it to change and use all of that to answer some past SOR questions, some questions from past papers. Right, so looking at our syllabus outcomes, we're looking mainly at H1, HSC outcome 3 and 5. So we'll explain aspects of religion and belief, like what is a religious landscape, what does secularism mean, what's the connection between religion and immigration. So those are key words, yeah, religious landscape, secularism, immigration. Examining the influence of religion, the next outcome. Would you call Australia still a Christian country? Has it ever been? What is the place of what the census calls other religions, which is quite a Christian-centric kind of a term, but there you go. And how as I said before, how the religious landscape has changed over time and what membership of each of the religious traditions looks like. That's the excerpt from the syllabus itself. So you can see some of the things that we'll be talking about, changing patterns and current religious landscape on the left. On the right, students learn to outline, as I've said previously, and then account for, which means explain reasons why the present religious landscape in relation to, we're going to do this. Christianity is a major religious tradition. We're definitely going to talk about immigration. We'll talk about denominational switching. We'll talk about secularism. I'll leave for today. We'll run out of time to talk about the rise of New Age religion. I'll leave that to your study and your teachers. You can see here a picture of one of the first mosques in Australia from back in 1882 from the great Afghan camel herders who were working in Australia, in inland Australia in that time. So let's talk about this idea of a landscape. So we know what a landscape painting is. You know, it's a painting of nature. And here you can see a landscape, a literal physical landscape. This is what Circular Quay looked like in the 1920s. So, you know, what do you see there and what don't you see? You can still see the Botanic Gardens, for instance. Here is the same area, Circular Quay, in the 1960s. So what do we see? What don't we see? We can see the Opera House, for instance, being constructed, literally being built at that time. And here is Circular Quay today, just a photo taken a couple of weeks ago. So you can see how the literal landscape in Australia over that period has changed quite dramatically. There are things there now which weren't there before. It looks different. The same way the religious landscape has changed in Australia over history. We can't see this necessarily physically, although there is, of course, evidence of some buildings which we have now, which we didn't have before. The way we see the religious landscape is by looking at statistics, in particular census data. So we're going to use a lot of statistics from the census, a measure that's taken every 5 years, which includes comments about religion in Australia, religious affiliation. So more on that. So see this graph here. On the left-hand axis, you've got the proportion of the population. Across the bottom, you've got the time over the last 50 years. So from 1971, from the census that was taken then, to today, 2021. The blue line represents Christianity. So can you see how Christianity over that 50-year period has been going down from nearly 90% of the population to today between 40 and 50% of the population. The orange line is no religion, the no religion category. It popped up on the census for the first time in 1971. I think it's had about 7% of respondents at that time, 6.7%, something like that. Through to today, when obviously that category is much larger. I'll talk about that later on. This third line here, the sort of the dark blue or the black line, represents other religions. And you can see that they have grown as well, the other religions, from a negligible amount in 1971 through to about 10% of the population today or at least last year in 2021. So let's talk about those big trends. The first thing that you need to remember in your study is the big trend, the big idea. If you've got these kind of firm building blocks, then we can add accuracy and detail with statistics later. So the proportion of Christian adherents between 1945 and the present has been steadily decreasing. But Christianity is still Australia's most common religion. Australia also is becoming more religiously diverse. So non-Christian religions, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, all of these are increasing. The no religion category also, as you can see, is increasing. On the last census, nearly 10 million Australians indicated this option. So Christianity, decreasing. These are our big trends. Other religions, increasing. No religion, increasing. Let's talk about Christianity. So obviously, since European people invaded Australia and took it as their own, Christianity has more or less been the major religious tradition. The percentage of Australians claiming affiliation, as we've said, has been steadily decreasing. Let's look at what that looks like with numbers. So 1947, 88%. Today, 43, or basically 44%. So these would be good to memorise or to have at least some of them in your kit bag to use in your answers. So 1947, 88%. It's imperative that you remember the current figure. So 2021, you have to memorise 44%, or if you want to be even more accurate, 43.9%. So please make a note of that now. The last 10 years is an interesting snapshot, from 61% in 2011 to 43% now, or 44% now. Last 50 years is another interesting snapshot, from 71, 86%, through again to 43.9%. So what does this look like in your answers? You can start with a big trend and then add detail and accuracy with the stats that you've remembered. So the big trend is the percentage of Australians who are Christian has steadily decreased since 1945, but Christianity is still the largest religious tradition. Practice writing that out. If you memorise that phrase, it'll just flow out of your pen when you need it for question 11 in the exam for a 5-mark question. In the 1947 census, 88% of Australians indicated they were Christian, whereas in 2021, the number was 43.9%. So you can see how we're adding detail and accuracy by using the statistics which we've memorised. Again, another example, same but different. So same first sentence, same big trend. The percentage of Australians who are Christian has steadily decreased since 1945. The decline has been rapid in the past decade, from 61% in 2011 to 43.9% in 2021. If you write about 3 of those, you'll find that suddenly you've absolutely remembered 43.9%. So that's not going to leave you. 2021, 43.9% Christian, and that's going to be information which you'll need for your exam. Let's look at some of the Christian denominations. Anglican is really interesting. It was, from the time of colonisation through to 1986, Anglican was the most popular, the most predominant Christian denomination. So obviously immigration has had an impact on all of this. Who was governing the early colony? England. What was the official religion? Church of England, which is today we call Anglican. Now, an important policy which we'll talk about later, in the 20th century, we had the White Australia policy, which meant that preference was given to people from European countries when it came to immigrating to Australia. This ensured continued migration from Britain to Australia, and that migration was encouraged with policy. And obviously, if a lot of British people, English people are coming to Australia, the Church of England is going to remain strong. So for that time, while that policy was active, I mean to say, it was reflected in the ongoing strength of Anglicanism. But happily, since 1970, that policy obviously has been disbanded. We're in the era now of multiculturalism. So other religious traditions and other Christian denominations have been growing. So in 1947, Anglicanism was the largest of the denominations within Christianity at 39%. Through to 1971, so we've got now the White Australia policy is being abandoned, disbanded, discontinued, but Anglicanism is still the largest of all of the Christian denomination. That swaps in 1986, the Catholic Church becomes larger. In 2006, Anglicanism, you can see those numbers just getting less and less and less. In 2006, the Anglican Church dips below the no religion category. So no religion is on the rise. Meanwhile, we'll talk more about that later, and it overtakes Anglicanism in 2006. In 2021, so our most recent status, Anglicanism is down to under 10%, approximately 10, but under 10. So 9.8%, and it's had the largest decrease numerically of any Christian denomination over the last 5 years, over the last census period. See the average age? I've included that because it tells you sort of what's happening. So younger people are abandoning the Anglican Church, or at least not joining the Anglican Church. Migration is not having a big impact on Anglicanism. Let's look at Catholicism. So, as I mentioned before, since 1986, Catholicism has been the most popular of the Christian denominations. Immigration has had a clear impact here. So, since the 1970s, since multiculturalism happened, since White Australia policy was disbanded, we've had a lot of immigration in Australia from Southeast Asian countries, and a lot of this immigration has been Catholic. Similarly, I've written there South American countries. So Catholicism is declining along with all of Christianity, but not as quickly as some of the other denominations, not as quickly as Anglicanism, thanks in part to the power of this immigration. And you'll see that in the stats. So the census, gives us numbers to prove what we can sort of see happening with the religious landscape. In 1947, we had 20.9% Catholics. In 1971, White Australia disbanded, 27%. In 1986, 26%. Now, it is sort of that steadiness in number. There's been a big growth in Australia's population at that time. So more and more people actually were nominated Catholic during that time. They were coming as immigrants from lots of different places. In 2016, the Catholic Church, although it hasn't decreased as much as other Christian denominations, it has fallen there below no religion. And in 2021, it's fallen a bit further. But as I've written there, still a lot of Catholics came mostly from the Philippines in this census period, and that has slowed the decrease. So here's the sort of the big snapshot of all of that. And it's worth memorizing some of this. So as you go down the list, you see the size of the different Christian denominations. Let's start at the bottom. So in 2016, Christianity was 52% of the population. In 2021, it's nearly 44%, 43.9%. Among that, in decreasing size, we've got Catholicism, Anglicanism, the Uniting Church, which I'll talk more about in a second, Christian NFD, which I'll talk about in a second. Then you can read them there for yourself. Pentecostal has remained more or less static. Now, this NFD business, that's been a growing category. It means not further defined. NFT stands for that. And it's just the people who write Christian on their census or Christianity without giving us further information about a denomination. You can see there it's grown quite a lot since 1996 to now. So you can speculate with your friends and teachers about, well, what might some of the reasons be? How can we account for that? Why aren't people indicating a denomination anymore? They still loosely call themselves Christian, but they don't want to add further definition or detail. You can see here, this is a table of the decreases. So Anglicanism has had numerically the largest decrease with 604, nearly 605,000 people fewer between last census and this census. Catholicism, 200,000 fewer, Uniting about the same, Presbyterian, 100,000 fewer, and down the list there. Some Christian categories have risen. So you can see that this NFD category has risen, Greek Orthodox, Maronite, Serbian Orthodox, all rising. Now, I posit that this is for two reasons. One, the next generation of these religious traditions, of these, not religious traditions, of these Christian denominations are more likely to maintain the beliefs and traditions of their parents. So the Greek Orthodox, Maronite, Serbian, and others you can read there, very closely bound to their own cultures, very respectful of the traditions of their parents, and more likely to maintain those religious traditions. Also, immigration has helped. So people have come from those places and brought with them their religion. Some more about that. So you can see there what I was just talking about, migration, and also this theory that of the next generation also not leaving the tradition quite as quickly as some of the other denominations of Christianity. 1.5% of Australians are Greek Orthodox. All right, a few words about denominational switching. So within Christianity, you have these sort of different streams. You have the Catholics, so you can see in the left-hand column. The centre column, you have got the Protestant, the protesting Protestant denominations. And in the right-hand column, you've got the Eastern Orthodox. So denominational switching means exactly what the title says. It's switching or changing between denominations, so leaving one and joining another. Denominational switching is most common between Protestant denominations. So people leaving Anglican and joining Pentecostal, for instance, would be a very common movement. It's much less common for people to, say, leave a Greek Orthodox denomination and join an Anglican. It would only ever sort of happen in the case of marriage, when sometimes people change religious tradition to match the tradition of their spouse. Listen, forgive me, not religious tradition, change Christian denomination to match the denomination of their spouse. All right, so a few more things about that. So you can just write down denominational switching is what it is. It means changing between denominations of Christianity. There you go. I've written that it may change. People may change because they're sort of, oh, look, I'm Christian. I believe in God. I believe in Jesus. But I'm not crazy about the social teachings over here. So I'm going to join this expression of Christianity, which suits me better as an individual. I've spoken about marriage already, and I've spoken about this already. Protestant denominational switching is common within the Protestant denominations. Most common into and out of Pentecostalism, and particularly among young people. This was the case. This is an interesting recent stat, actually. So in those years, you can see there, 1996 to 2006, in that decade, a lot of young people joined the Pentecostal church, and it was perceived at that time that the kind of the youthful expression of Christianity that is Pentecostalism, with kind of concerts and light displays and a strong sense of youth and community, that was working then with young people. But that's rather decreased in the last census, which I'll talk about in a second. Nevertheless, these are three things to remember. So denominational switching between Protestant into out of Pentecostalism, tend to be young. So Pentecostalism, you can see there, had a period of growth, but has declined along with everything else recently. And it's declined among the young in the last census. Hillsong is an expression. You may have heard of the Hillsong Church. It's a church that was very popular in Sydney and still has a high profile, I guess. But you can see there the attendance between 2019 and 2021 has more than halved. Now, that might be because of COVID, of course, and people not coming back. And it might also be because of some scandals that have happened in the Hillsong Church, which I'll leave you to talk about in your classrooms. Also, statistically, I found this interesting, that women have been leaving the Hillsong Church at a slightly higher rate than men. When I say Hillsong, I was using that term synonymously with Pentecostalism. So, I mean, women have been leaving Pentecostal church. You can see there the source of some of those statistics. Okay, the Uniting Church is an interesting one. It's the third largest of the Christian denominations. It's still shrinking along with all the others. So you'd almost think this was a syllabus dot point. It comes up so often in examinations. I always urge students in my classes to memorize this. So the Uniting Church was formed in 1977. You have to remember it's Methodist, Presbyterian, and Congregationalist, which is the one that everyone always forgets. Those are three denominations of Christianity. They decided to unify, uniting. It's an expression of ecumenism, which you can talk about again in your classes. Uniting is quite a liberal expression of Christianity. It is accepting, for instance, of women pastors. All right, so what does all of that look like in terms of past papers? Which decade? Here's my technique. If you've watched other masterclasses, this is how I like to teach to do multiple choice. Underline key terms. So Catholic Church, largest Christian denomination. Wasn't in the 50s or the 60s. We know it was in the 70s. So you put a little diagonal cross through those options. Circle the correct one. Mark it on the answer sheet. Move on. So according to census data in 2016, so these are past papers, so they're dealing with the old census of 2016. This year, 2023, and future years, you'll be dealing with the 2021 census. So we need to learn new statistics. So 2016, highest percentage of adherence among these from this list. Who had the highest adherence? It wasn't Lutheran, Orthodox, or Pentecostal. They're all small, even though they may be growing or at least remaining static. Anglican, it's interesting because it's decreasing rapidly, but next to all of those, whether you're talking about 2016 or 2021, Anglican has the largest percentage of adherence compared with those other denominations. All right, which of the following was significantly affected by post-1945 migration from England? If you didn't underline that, this is why I like to teach to underline. If you miss that important detail, you'll get the answer wrong. So is migration from England going to impact Hindus? No, even though they've grown substantially in that time. Is it going to impact Catholics? No. We talked about Catholics coming from South America, Southeast Asia, even you could argue from Ireland, but not from England. Buddhists? No, obviously. Anglican, Church of England, English migration. Yep, there's your answer. Here's another one. A selection of religious groups in Australia is shown. How many of these groups are Christian denominations? So you underline that key term. Then mark your paper. Show visible literacy. It's not, Judaism is not Christianity. Anglicanism is, so are the Salvos, and so are Presbyterians. The answer is 3. Which of the following is true of Christianity as a religious tradition in Australia? Is it true Christianity is no longer the dominant religious tradition? That's a good distractor, isn't it? It's true that Christianity is shrinking, it's declining. Is it true that it's no longer the dominant religious tradition? No, it's not true. Pentecostalism attracts more younger adherents. That could be right. Let's leave it blank until we've read all of the options. All Christian denominations are working towards changing some beliefs to achieve interfaith dialogue. Changing beliefs is not something that religions tend to do. The beliefs are the beliefs. They don't change. The beliefs the key beliefs, the principal beliefs that you learned about in year 11, they don't change. They remain the same. So that's not true. Christian denominations are committed to having a reduced role in the provision of educational and welfare services. Again, if you didn't read it carefully, if you didn't pick up that word reduced, then you might get it wrong. It's not true that they want to do less of that, welfare and education. Absolutely not true. So the correct answer there is B, Pentecostalism, attracting more younger adherents. That's a pretty tough question, I think, if you don't read it properly. All right, I think this is the kind of thing that might come up in an exam. So start over on the right-hand column here. See that area of red on the top of each of the sort of the column graphs. The area of red is people who didn't write their religion on the census. So we're not going to worry about that. It's the people who aren't in the stats. It's 5 to 10%, and it's not significant. Here, you have the category of no religion. So you can see the right-hand most column, that's the total. So the total of Australian population who have no religion is there. The dark blue is, in inverted commas, other religions. So we're talking there about Buddhism, Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, Sikhism. Light blue is Christianity. So again, this rightmost column is all age groups. But here are the different age groups as we work our way across the bar graph. So people who are aged right now, 2021 figures here, people who are aged over 75 years old. Does this make sense? Lot of light blue. So older people tend to be Christian, not very much of the orange category. So older people tend not to have no religion. That kind of aligns with what we would think it would be, right? 55 to 74. So this generation is known as the baby boomers. Again, a lot of Christians, not very much other religions, not too much no religion at all. Skip down to the millennials, the generation called the millennials. Now we see the light blue really shrinking. So younger people tend not as strongly to be Christian. This group have got the biggest of the no religion categories. So just hold on to that fact in case it comes up in a multiple choice question in this year's exam. So millennial people would tend to be no religion more than other age groups. You people, Generation Z, Gen Z, or Gen Z, the people watching this this masterclass, from 10 to 24 years, again, it's sort of, I guess, more of a balance between religion and non-religion. When you think about it, if you're age 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, probably your parents are filling in the census for you. So that would have an impact on the answers in this category. But you can see Christianity is a bit stronger there, and no religion just a little bit less than the millennials. All right, so let's have a look at what a question might look like based on that information. So again, we're using old census here. You'll have to learn this for the new census. According to Australian census data 2016, which of the following is correct? Is Catholicism the fastest growing denomination in Australia? No, Catholicism is not growing fast. It's staying it's declining, staying pretty steady, but it's certainly not growing. Hinduism is the second largest religious tradition in Australia. That's quite a good distractor. And if you haven't accurately learned your statistics, you might be thinking, I can't remember if that's right or not. If you can't remember, leave it blank for now and read the rest of the options. Australians over the age of 65 likely to identify themselves as Christian. That's a good answer. Let's see if it's correct by reading the rest of the options. Australians identify having no religion make up the majority of the population. Not yet, they don't. So we know that D is not correct. I can tell you B is not correct. The second largest religious tradition, the largest is Christianity. The second largest is actually Islam. C is the correct answer. Australians over the age of 65, yeah, they're likely to identify as Christian. All right, let's talk about the impact of immigration. You can see a great poster here from post-war Australia, trying to, I guess, encourage people to migrate to Australia. And this is the era of the white Australia policy. So I think it's helpful to think of immigration in these sort of chunks of time, waves of immigration. Some people say sort of periods of Australian history. So this period of 20 years from 1945 to 1965, we have the post-war era, the idea that Australia had to populate or perish. So we needed more Australian people. We were worried about the threat of invasion or further war after the horror of World War II. So this idea of populate, of increasing the population, was an important idea. But who did we want to increase with? Well, it was a racist time in Australia's history, if we're being honest. So immigration from European countries was exclusively what we wanted. But there was this policy, this insidious, very evil policy called the White Australia policy, which we can see now is the wrong thing to do, but it was the policy at this time. So what impact did that have? We've talked about this already. Anglicanism remained strong, but immigration from across Europe, still white Australia, right? But post-war immigration from across Europe did increase diversity within Christianity. So Catholicism and Orthodox denominations did grow during that period of history. Next period of history, the 1970s and 80s, the White Australia policy was ended. It was ended in the early 70s by the Whitlam government. And we have this new era, an era of multiculturalism. We also have conflicts happening overseas. So we have the Vietnam War, and then there's a conflict in Lebanon, which has an impact on immigration to Australia. What happened? We had immigration from Southeast Asia. Buddhism grew, and Catholicism in particular was a beneficiary of this immigration. Also, you can see there the impact of immigration from Lebanon. More recently, in the last sort of 30 years, we have multiculturalism continuing and increasing. There was conflict not this time in the Asian region, but this time in the Middle Eastern region. So you can remember some of the, well, you don't remember, but you've read about the Iraq conflict in Afghanistan. We had refugees and asylum seekers before this, but also during this time. And also this idea of skilled migration coming, you can see in the picture there, advertising being a nurse in Australia, migration coming from all over the world to meet labour needs in Australia. So the impact on religion was this. So we had increasing religious diversity, growth of Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism. The Anglican Church, the Anglican denomination of Christianity, diminishes and keeps diminishing. Catholicism, thanks to immigration from places with big Catholic populations, remains relatively steady, although declining. If you want to just pause this and screenshot that, that's a table with all of those last few slides, which I've just said. Okay, this is from the census data. So you can say in the period of the last census, we have a lot of migrants coming to Australia who are Christian. So nearly 300,000 migrants who came during that time, 28% of them, nearly a third of them, are Christian. 40% belong to other religions. About the same percentage who are Christian tend to be no religion at all. So 28% Christian, 28% no religion, nearly 41% other religions. That's Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Judaism, and others. 2% don't say, and that takes us to our total. So you can see that immigration does have an impact on the religious landscape. That's the key column to look at there. Oh, what's the impact of immigration? We've seen the impact on Christianity. What's the immigration on the so-called other religions? So Islam is the largest of the non-Christian religions, up again this census, 2021 census, now 3.2%. It became the largest non-Christian religion in 2016. And you can see there the countries that Muslim people are coming from: Pakistan, Afghanistan, India, Bangladesh. Hinduism used to be the third biggest of these traditions. Now it's moved up to second. It's 2.7%. And a lot of people who are arriving in the last 5-year period have been Hindu, most of them coming from India and Nepal. Buddhism has remained steady, grown numerically, but remained steady as a percentage of the population. It's, as I said before, it's been overtaken by Hinduism, so it's now the third largest. During the 70s and 80s, this was a time of rapid growth in Buddhism. We talked about the Vietnam War and the refugees that came to Australia as a result of that. And Buddhism, again, has been growing since then. You can see some of the source countries there. Sikhism is Australia's, in terms of percentage, Australia's fastest growing religious tradition. So nearly 60,000 recent migrants, almost all of them coming from India, are Sikh. And you can see there. So since 2000, in a 10-year period, the number of people rather who are affiliated with Sikhism has almost tripled. So there's none of the other religious categories are growing so fast as Sikhism is. Judaism, on the other hand, has been steady for the whole time. You can take it back even further than this, but I went back to 1986 and is basically 0.4% of the Australian population all the time. The one exception was 2006 when it wasn't 0.4, it was 0.5. So Judaism has been a very steady proportion of the Australian population, a very steady part of our religious landscape. All right, now here's all of what I've just been saying in the form of a graph from the Australian Bureau of Statistics. The light blue line is Islam, so you can see where it wasn't the major non-Christian religion, but became so in 2016 and has continued to grow. Again, immigration plus adherence now of the next generation, plus the next generation following their parents' tradition. You can see Hinduism overtaking the dark blue, overtaking the orange of Buddhism. Buddhism is still growing. It's just not growing as fast as the other three. Sikhism is the red line. You can see the rapid growth down there. All right, so an example of the kind of 5-mark question, the question 11, a written question, which needs this information, was a few years ago now, the 2020 HSC. Without mass migration, the Australian religious landscape would look very different today. How accurate is this statement? So the kind of answer you write here, I've talked about this in another masterclass, which you can check out, the 5-marker masterclass. Question 11 masterclass. But here it is. You can pause and screenshot if you like. The first thing you need to do is make a judgment. How accurate is it? To what extent is it accurate? It is clearly accurate. So 1945, the landscape was overwhelmingly Christian, with Anglicanism the largest denomination. Add detail by adding a statistic. Following the populate or perish immigration program, mass migration from Europe caused diversity in Christianity, growth of Catholicism and Orthodox. This led to that. This cause had that effect. So following the abolition of the White Australia policy in 1973, immigration from countries like Vietnam led to the growth of Buddhism, which today is 2.4%. Here's my next cause and effect. Immigrants fleeing conflict in the Middle East and North Africa led to Islam becoming the largest non-Christian religion at 3.2%. In all, immigration has, here's another judgment word, clearly caused the religious landscape to look very different today by increasing diversity in Christianity and causing rapid growth in non-Christian religious traditions. It's short, it's 5 out of 5, it's got detail and accuracy, it's got cause and effect. Bank it and move on. Let's talk about no religion. So no religion is, this is the story of the Western world, but a really strong story in Australia. So no religion now is nearly 40% of the Australian population, 38.9%. It's been growing. It was first introduced in 1971 and it's been growing since then. Your teachers will talk about this term secularism, the secular world. It's a synonym, which is to say it means the same thing as no religion. So here's what a secular person would argue, that there should not be religion in government or education. We shouldn't have religious schools or in society in general. It doesn't matter if they believe in the supernatural dimension or not, whether they might be strongly atheist or they might be agnostic, they might have some belief in the supernatural dimension. But if you're indicating no religion, you do not belong to a religious tradition. And we're seeing that grow, as I said. So it was nearly 7% in 71. 40 years later, in 2006, it's 19%. Then it explodes. 2016, 30%. 2021 grows again to nearly 39%. So why do you reckon this is happening? You can talk about this in your study groups, but an important factor is this notion of the rise of individualism, individual freedom. So it's a certain definition of freedom, which not a lot of religious people like I wouldn't agree with this definition of freedom, but some people hold this, that freedom means you can choose lots of things. You can choose whether you are religious or not. You don't have to follow the traditions of your family. You don't believe that necessarily there's a religious truth. You just get to choose. Obviously, there's been secularism. No religion has grown because religious institutions have let people down. So, and Christianity has been one of those institutions that has let people down. Those scandals have been widely reported. Those scandals have had devastating consequences in the lives of people, real consequences. And so people are rejecting religion, I think it's fair to say, for that reason. There's this perception also that religious social teachings are archaic. The word archaic is a good word to use in your answer. It means old-fashioned, very old-fashioned. So examples of these would be teaching like marriage, family, the human person, sexuality. The recent euthanasia debate, which we've had in New South Wales, the Christian teaching or the Muslim teaching or the Jewish teaching, for instance, that human life is precious, was considered an archaic tradition by many in the secular world, an archaic teaching. The perception, here's another reason that secularism might have grown, the perception that science has proven a lot of religious teachings to be false. And here's what secularism looks like. So 2016 is light blue, 2016 is dark blue. You can see state by state here. So this is no religion. So New South Wales has got actually the lowest proportion of people who say no religion on the census. See Victoria, their dark blue line goes for longer. That means that more people in Victoria are saying no religion. Queensland, no, the no religion line goes even longer. South Australia, a lot of people saying no religion there. Western Australia is down a bit, about equal with Queensland. Tasmania have got the highest proportion of no religion. So half of people, 50% of people in Tasmania, put no religion on the census. Northern Territory is low, not as low as New South Wales, but low. And you can see there the ACT's result as well. And the average of all of the totals sitting just under 40%. So what is some past paper questions about no religion? Well, this is sort of flipping it. So which Australian state has the highest percentage of people with religion, so with a religious affiliation? Well, if you've got the lowest of no religion, then you've got the highest of religious affiliation. So the answer there is New South Wales. In 2016, again, these will be different for the 2021 numbers. What percentage of Australians wrote no religion? Well, this is a great example of how things change over time. In 2016, the correct answer, about 30%. In 2021, if you're answering this question for our data right now, the correct answer is closer to 40%. Here's another one. What could account for increasing secularism? So account means give reasons for. Is it about political activism? Not really. No, you can be religious and political. Is it about denominational switching? No, denominational people are by definition religious. You are a member of one religious denomination, you're moving to another religious denomination. That is not secular. Could be the rise of individualism, but it's not about environmental awareness. Lots of religious people have very high environmental awareness. Pope Francis is one. So C is the correct answer there, the rise of individualism. All right, so here are the key things which you should probably try and memorize. Here are your stats. So Christianity, last census, 2021 census, you can call it 44%, and you want to be super accurate, 43.9%. No religion, you can call it 39%, again, super accurate, 38.9%. Islam 3.2, Hinduism 2.7, Buddhism 2.4, Sikhism 0.8, Judaism steady at 0.4. You can see there the sections within Christianity of Catholicism, Anglican nearly 10, uniting, diminishing to under 3, not Christianity not further defined, growing to 2.7, Eastern Orthodox strong, and Pentecostal steady. So let's look at, that's getting towards the end of our masterclass now. Let's look at how we've gone. So we wanted to explore the current religious landscape in Australia and the way it's changed over time. I think you could do that. You could speak to that. So can you do these things? Can you use census data to outline the percentage of Australians in the major religious traditions and no religion category? Well, if you know this table, then yes, you can. Can you do this? Can you use census data to describe how religious landscape has changed over time? So what has happened to Christianity over time? Give me some data to prove it. What has happened to no religion over time? Quote some statistics, quote some census data to prove it. Can you explain factors that have contributed to that change? So why has secularism grown? Why has Christianity diminished? What has immigration got to do with all of it? And can you apply all of that to answer some sample questions from past papers? Well, I think you can. Listen, everyone, I wish you all the very best in your HSC. That's the end of the masterclass today. All the best for your study.